I still remember that morning like it just happened yesterday. The sun had barely risen, to pale light slipping through the curtains of my small living room. The air felt different that day, heavy, almost warning me that something was about to change. I didn't know it yet, but by the time the sun would set, my world would never feel the same again. I was sitting on the couch, sipping my usual cup of tea, when my daughter, Sarah, walked in. She was dressed sharply, her hair tied back, makeup done more than usual. She had this confident, almost cold look in her eyes. I smiled, as any father would. "Big meeting today?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful. She didn't even look at me, just walked straight to the dining table, grabbed her phone and started scrolling. Something about her silence made my heart uneasy. Sarah wasn't like this. She used to be the kind of girl who'd sit beside me every morning, talk about her dreams, her plans, even the small things like how her coffee didn't taste right. We were close, closer than most fathers and daughters I knew, but lately, something had changed. Her words had become shorter, her tone colder, and her eyes distant. I wanted to believe it was just work stress, or maybe she was just growing up wanting her space. But a father's heart knows when something deeper is wrong. That morning, I finally asked, "Sarah, is everything okay between us?" She sighed, a sound that cut sharper than any argument. "Dad, please, I'm late for work. Can we not do this right now?" "Do what?" I asked gently. "Talk." Her eyes finally met mine, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in them that I had never seen before. I saw annoyance, irritation, maybe even resentment. She looked away, grabbed her purse, and said something that would echo in my mind for days to come. "Maybe if you started paying rent instead of just sitting around, I'd have more respect for you." I froze. It took me a moment to process what she had just said. Rent. In my own house. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My throat went dry, my heart started pounding. I could feel the walls of my home closing in around me. "Sarah," I whispered, "this is our house. The one I built. For us." She shrugged. "You built it, sure. But who's paying the bills now? Who's keeping the lights on?" Her voice had that sharp edge, the kind that doesn't just hurt your ears, but your soul. And just like that, she was gone. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the empty house like thunder. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the door. The silence was deafening. I wasn't angry at first. I was confused, shocked, hurt. I thought maybe she'd had a bad day. Maybe someone had said something to her. Maybe tomorrow she'd come back and apologize. But she didn't. The next few days were worse. She barely spoke to me. She started locking her bedroom door. She stopped eating the meals I cooked. And every night, I could hear her voice from the other room arguing with someone on the phone. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I walked closer to her door. Her voice was low, but the words were clear. "I can't live with him forever. He's just stuck. I need space, Mom." Mom. That word hit me like a punch in the chest. Her mother, my ex-wife, had left us years ago. We hadn't spoken in ages. I thought Sarah barely did either. But now, I knew. The distance between us wasn't just life or age. It was influence someone had been whispering in her ear the next morning. She didn't greet me. She just dropped a paper on the table. A printed sheet folded neatly. "What's this?" I asked, jaw. She didn't answer. I opened it. It was an invoice for rent. My own daughter had sent me a rent bill. I looked up at her, searching her face for even a trace of the little girl I once knew. The one who used to hug me goodnight. The one who'd sit on my shoulders at the fair. The one who'd say, "You're my hero, Dad." But she wasn't there anymore. All I saw now was someone hardened, distant, and completely detached from the man who raised her. My chest tightened. "Sarah, why are you doing this?" She crossed her arms. "Because it's time you took responsibility. You've been sitting here for years, doing nothing while I handle everything. If you can't contribute, then maybe you should find somewhere else to stay." I didn't say a word because in that moment, I realized arguing wouldn't fix this. Something deeper was broken. I nodded slowly, stood up, and walked out into the yard. The air felt cold, even though it was a warm day. The grass was overgrown. The paint on the fence was peeling. All the things I had promised myself I'd fix someday. But now I didn't see a home anymore. I saw a stranger's house, a home I built with love, now filled with bitterness. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about every decision that had led us here. Every sacrifice I made for her. The extra shifts, the sleepless nights, the dreams I gave up. And this was what it had come to. A rent bill. But beneath the pain, something else started to stir inside me. Something I hadn't felt in a long time, resolve. If she wanted to treat this like a transaction, then so be it. But what she didn't know was that the deed to the house was still in my name. I closed my eyes that night with a heavy heart, and a silent plan forming in the back of my mind. A plan not for revenge, but for justice, for self-respect, and maybe, just maybe, for a lesson she'd never forget. The next morning, I woke up with a strange calmness. Not peace, but calmness. The kind that comes after a storm when you already know the damage is done. And there's no point denying it anymore. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking around the room that used to be filled with family photos. Half of them were gone now, taken down by Sarah when she redecorated. Even the one of us at her graduation was missing. I wondered if she'd thrown it away, or hidden it somewhere she didn't have to see my face. I made my tea and stood by the window watching her leave for work. She didn't say a word, just grabbed her bag, avoided my eyes, and walked out the door like a stranger renting a room, not a daughter sharing a home. That silence, it was louder than words. After she left, I sat down and thought about what had gone wrong. Where had I failed? I replayed every memory in my head. The arguments, the quiet dinners, the long hours she worked. Maybe she was tired of carrying the load, I thought. Maybe she really believed I'd stopped trying. But I hadn't stopped. Life had just slowed me down after her mother and I divorced. I focused everything on Sarah. Every paycheck, every plan, all for her. I'd put her through college, helped her buy her first car, even co-signed for the loan when she wanted to start her business. And now, she was sending me rent invoices. I couldn't help but wonder who had put this idea in her head. I remembered her late-night phone calls, the way she'd suddenly start defending her mother again. After years of silence, that's when it hit me. Maybe this wasn't just Sarah acting out. Maybe her mother, my ex-wife Layla, had something to do with it. Layla was complicated, smart, ambitious, but cold when she wanted to be. When we were together, she had a way of making everyone feel like they owed her something. I used to think it was confidence. Later, I learned it was control. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Layla had always resented the fact that I kept the house after the divorce. She said it was unfair, even though I'd built it with my own two hands. Maybe she had found a way to take it from me after all. Through Sarah, I decided to find out. That evening, when Sarah came home, she looked tired. She didn't even glance my way, but I tried anyway. Long day, I asked. Just busy, she muttered, pouring herself a glass of water. I hesitated, then asked softly, "You've been talking to your mom again, haven't you?" She froze for a moment, then turned sharply. "So what if I have?" "I'm not saying it's wrong," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "I just thought she didn't want to talk to either of us anymore." "She doesn't want to talk to you," she snapped. "She actually cares about me." Her words stung like needles. I looked down, forcing myself to stay composed. "I've always cared, Sarah," I said quietly. She scoffed. "You call sitting around caring? You haven't worked in years." "Dad, I'm tired of taking care of everything while you just exist." Exist, that word hit harder than anything else she'd said before. I wanted to explain about the layoffs, the rejection letters, how I'd been looking for work but couldn't find any after the company shut down. But I knew she wouldn't listen. Not anymore. Someone else had already written the story in her head, so I just nodded. "All right, Sarah, you're right. Maybe I have been slow. Maybe I need to make some changes." She didn't respond. She just walked past me and into her room, shutting the door behind her. But what she didn't know was that I was already planning my next step that night. I opened an old laptop, the same one I hadn't touched in months, and began searching. I looked up her business name, her job, her social media. I needed to understand what kind of world she was living in now. And what I found left me stunned. There she was, smiling in photos with a group of people I didn't recognize. But in one of the pictures, standing right beside her, was Layla, my ex-wife. The same woman who'd sworn she wanted nothing to do with me or my life. They were together, laughing, celebrating something as I read the caption. My stomach turned. New chapter begins. Proud of you. My girl. That's when I realized it wasn't just about rent, it was about control. Layla was feeding Sarah the same poison she once fed me. The belief that love and worth are measured by money. That if you're not earning, you're not deserving. And she was winning, but not for long. The next day, I decided to visit Layla's office. I hadn't seen her in years, but I still knew where she worked. She never changed her habits. The same firm, the same routine, the same perfectly controlled life. When I walked in, she was sitting behind her desk, typing something on her laptop. She looked up, and for a brief moment, surprise flickered across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar, polished smile. Well, she said, crossing her arms. Look who finally decided to show up. I didn't waste time. What are you telling Sarah? She leaned back. I'm just helping her see things clearly. You can't blame me for that. Helping her turn against her father. I asked. Layla smirked. I didn't have to do much. She's a smart girl. She can see who's actually contributing and who isn't. Her words were like tiny knives. Sharp, precise, deliberate. You filled her head with nonsense, I said. You're turning her against me. She's an adult, Layla replied calmly, and she deserves the truth. You had your time, but it's over. Maybe it's time you let go of that house. She wants independence. Give it to her. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay composed. You don't understand. That house isn't just property. It's our life, her memories, my entire world. Layla smiled coldly. Then maybe it's time you found a new one. And just like that, she turned back to her computer, dismissing me like I was nothing. I walked out of that building feeling something shift inside me. The sadness that had filled me for weeks started to fade, and in its place, something stronger began to rise. Determination. If Layla thought she could take everything from me again, she was wrong. And if Sarah had forgotten who built that home, I would remind her not with words, but with actions. That night, I pulled out the house documents from my drawer. The deed still had my name on it. Every payment, every tax receipt, all in my records. She might live there, but I still owned it. That realization gave me back something I'd lost: power. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully, because now I had a plan. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. For the first time in months, I felt awake, not tired, not defeated, just focused. I brewed my tea, but this time it wasn't to calm my nerves. It was to think strategically. I had spent days feeling hurt and confused. But now something inside me had changed. Sarah wanted to treat this house like a business. Fine, then I would handle it like one. I knew she believed she was in control, paying the bills, managing the house, making decisions. But what she didn't realize was that legally, everything still belonged to me. The land, the structure, even the paperwork that got her electricity connected, all under my name. I wasn't planning to destroy her. No, I was going to teach her. She needed to understand. What happens when you forget where you came from? When pride replaces gratitude. I started with small steps, quiet ones. That day, while she was at work, I went to the town office. I met an old friend there, Fareed, a clerk I'd known for years. He used to visit our home back when Sarah was a little girl. Fareed, I said, smiling faintly, I need a favor. I'm thinking about selling my property. He raised an eyebrow. The house. That one. But you live there, don't you? I do, I replied, but maybe it's time to move on. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll prepare the preliminary paperwork. You can always cancel later if you change your mind. I thanked him, but deep down I knew I wouldn't be canceling anything. That evening, Sarah came home late again. I could tell from the way she dropped her bag and kicked off her shoes that she'd had a long day. But before she could disappear into her room, I spoke. Sarah, I said gently, we need to talk, she groaned. Dad, not now. It'll take just 1 minute, I interrupted. My voice steady, she sighed and crossed her arms. Fine. What now? I smiled faintly. You said I should contribute, right? Well, I've decided to handle my responsibilities differently. She frowned. What do you mean? I'm planning to sell the house, I said. Her expression froze. For a moment, she didn't even blink. Then her eyes widened. You're what? I said I'm selling it. I think it's time. You want independence, right? Maybe this is a sign we both need to start fresh. She stared at me like I had just spoken another language. You can't sell my house, she snapped. Your house, I repeated calmly. Sarah, the documents are still in my name. Her face turned pale. You wouldn't do that. I leaned back in my chair, my voice quiet but firm. You told me to pay rent or get out. You made it clear this is a business arrangement now, not a family home. So I'm treating it like one. She blinked rapidly, trying to process it. You're just saying that to scare me, am I? I said softly. Then check the deed yourself. Stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. I could hear her pacing, muttering to herself. The sound reminded me of when she was a teenager, angry, stubborn, refusing to listen. But this time, she wasn't angry because she didn't get her way. She was angry because she realized she wasn't as powerful as she thought. And for the first time in months, I felt in control again. Over the next few days, things got tense. She stopped talking to me completely. No greetings, no small talk. Just silence. But silence is a powerful teacher. While she avoided me, I started moving forward quietly. I met with an agent, discussed valuations, and even took a few potential buyers on silent visits when she wasn't home. Each time I watched their faces as they admired the home I'd built. The house that held decades of laughter, arguments, birthdays, and quiet evenings. It hurt deeply to think of selling it, but I wasn't doing this just to make money. I was doing this to take back something more valuable, respect. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I received a call from Layla Ali, she said. Her tone sharp and serious. What is this nonsense I hear about selling the house? So Sarah had told her. Of course, I stayed calm. You seem to know everything before I do, Layla. Impressive. Don't be smart, she snapped. That house belongs to Sarah now. No, I said firmly. It belongs to me, legally and morally. There was a long pause on the other end. Then she said coldly, you're doing this out of spite. You're just trying to hurt her because you feel powerless. Her words cut, but I didn't show it. No, Layla, I'm doing this because she needs to understand what happens when she forgets who stood by her when no one else did. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, she said. It already is, I replied and hung up. That evening, Sarah finally broke her silence. She walked into the living room, her voice trembling. Dad, we need to talk. And I looked up from my paperwork. Sure. Are you really selling it? She asked. Yes, I said quietly. Her eyes filled with disbelief. How can you even think about that? This is where I grew up. I smiled sadly. You said it yourself, it's just a house. You made it clear it's no longer our home. Tears welled in her eyes, but she fought them back. This isn't fair. No, I agreed softly. It's not. But life isn't always fair, Sarah. Sometimes we have to lose something to remember its value. She didn't reply. She just turned around and left. But this time, she didn't slam the door. That silence. It was different. Not angry, thoughtful, I could feel it. Something in her was shifting. A week later, I got a call from a serious buyer. He offered a fair price, and I accepted the meeting. I didn't tell Sarah. Not yet. On the morning of the visit, She came into the living room and froze when she saw the for sale sign outside the window. Her voice shook. "You actually did it." I nodded. "I told you I would." Her jaw tightened. "You're unbelievable." I took a deep breath. "Sarah, I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it because I refuse to be disrespected in my own home. You turned this house into a battlefield, and I'm ending the war." She didn't respond, just stared at me with a mix of anger, confusion, and guilt. Then, quietly, she said, "You'll regret this." I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I'll finally have my peace." That night, I sat outside under the porch light, listening to the quiet hum of the city, and for the first time, I didn't feel sad or angry. I felt free, because the truth is, revenge isn't about hurting someone back. It's about reclaiming the part of yourself you lost when they betrayed you, and I was just getting started. The next few days felt strangely quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes before something breaks. Sarah barely spoke to me after I put up the for sale sign. She'd leave early for work and come home late, pretending not to notice the strangers walking around our house, the potential buyers admiring the living room, the garden, the very memories she once shared with me. Every time I saw her glance at them, I noticed something flicker in her eyes, maybe fear, maybe guilt, but she never said a word. Until one evening I was sitting at the dining table, going over some old bills, when she walked in. Her shoulders were tense, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Dad," she said finally, "can we talk?" Her voice wasn't sharp this time. It was low, uncertain. I nodded. Of course. She sat across from me, avoiding my eyes at first. I talked to Mom. "I'm sure you did," I said calmly. "She says you're overreacting," she continued, "that you're just doing this to prove a point." I smiled faintly. "And what do you think?" She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know anymore." That answer, "I don't know," said more than any argument could. She wasn't sure anymore. The certainty that once fueled her anger was crumbling. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. "Sarah, do you remember when you were 12? You fell off your bicycle and scraped your knee. You cried all the way home, but you didn't want to show it because you thought I'd call you weak." She looked at me, confused. "Why are you bringing that up?" "Because when we got home, you let me clean the wound. You trusted me even when it hurt. You knew I'd never do anything to harm you." Her lips trembled slightly, but she stayed quiet. "I'm still that same father," I said softly. "I may have lost my way for a while, but I never stopped loving you. Not for a second." Her eyes glistened, but she looked away. "You just don't understand, Dad. Things are different now. Life's expensive." Mom says, I interrupted gently. "Your mother says many things, Sarah, but she doesn't live here. She didn't build this. We did." There was silence, the kind that fills the air when truth finally starts to sink in. She stood up quickly, muttered, "I need to think," and walked away. Later that night, I was sitting on the porch when I heard the sound of quiet sobbing coming from her room. I didn't go in. I wanted to. Every instinct told me to knock, to comfort her, but I knew this was something she needed to face alone. The truth was catching up to her, slowly, painfully. The next morning, she didn't go to work. She stayed home, sitting in her room for hours. When she finally came out, she looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept at all. "Dad," she said quietly, "I didn't mean some of the things I said. I didn't speak. I just waited." She continued, her voice breaking. "I was angry. I thought you didn't care. Mom made it sound like you were just giving up on life. And you believed her?" I asked softly. She nodded, tears welling up. "I don't know why. I guess I wanted to believe someone had the answers." I sighed. "We all want to believe that, Sarah. But sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who lead us away from ourselves." She wiped her eyes, whispering, "Are you really going to sell the house?" I looked at her carefully. "Would it change anything if I said yes?" Her lip quivered. "It would change everything." For the first time in months, I saw it, the little girl I once knew, The one who used to wait for me by the window every evening. The one who believed I could fix anything. I stood up and placed my hand on her shoulder. Sarah, I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted you to understand what this home really means. It's not about ownership. It's about respect. She nodded slowly, biting her lip. I do respect you, Dad. I let Mom fill my head with things. She said you were lazy, that you didn't try anymore. I thought maybe she was right. I smiled sadly. People say a lot of things when they want to justify their choices. But the truth, it always finds its way home. Sarah started crying then, quietly, like she didn't want to, but couldn't stop. I let her cry. Sometimes tears say more than words ever can. When she finally calmed down, said gently, "It's not too late, Sarah. We can start over. But that depends on whether you still want this house to be a home or just a building with walls." She looked up at me, eyes red. I wanted to be home again. That was the first real moment of connection we'd had in months. Over the next few days, the energy in the house changed. Sarah started helping out again, cooking, cleaning, even sitting beside me for tea like she used to. She apologized, quietly, for the hurtful words. I didn't make it easy. I let her find her own way back. But inside, my heart was finally at peace. Then, one evening, she said something that surprised me. "Dad," she began hesitantly, "I want to buy the house from you. Not because I want it for myself, but because I want you to have something. I want to make things right." I smiled faintly. "That's thoughtful, Sarah. But you don't need to buy it. You already have what matters." She frowned. "What do you mean?" I walked to my drawer, pulled out a small envelope, and handed it to her. She looked inside. It was the house deed. "I went to finalize the sale today," said, "but I couldn't do it. Instead, I changed the paperwork. The house is now in your name." Her eyes widened. "What?" "No, Dad, I can't. You already did," I interrupted gently. "You learned what truly matters. That's worth more than any rent you could have asked for." Tears rolled down her cheeks again. "But why would you do that after everything I said?" I smiled. "Because forgiveness is stronger than pride. And because I wanted you to realize family isn't about who pays the bills. It's about who stays when everything else falls apart." She hugged me then, really hugged me for the first time in a long time. And in that moment, all the anger, all the misunderstanding, all the distance melted away that night. As I stood by the window, watching her sleep peacefully for the first time in months, I whispered to myself, "You took back everything, old man. Not the house, not the money, but the love." Because that was the real revenge, not in taking something away, but in reclaiming what should have never been lost. It had been a few peaceful weeks since Sarah and I made peace. The air in the house felt lighter, like the shadows that once lingered in every corner had finally lifted. But I knew there was still one thing left, undone. One truth that hadn't yet been spoken, and deep down, I knew Sarah felt it too. She avoided the topic, but every now and then, I'd catch her glancing at her phone at her mother's name flashing across the screen, and then quietly putting it down until one Saturday morning she finally said it. "Dad, I need to see Mom." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the uncertainty beneath it. I nodded. "You should." She looked surprised. "You're not angry." I smiled faintly. "Why would I be? Sometimes you have to face the person who built the walls before you can tear them down." That afternoon, she left to meet her mother. I didn't ask where. I didn't ask when she'd be back. But as I watched her car disappear down the road, I whispered a quiet prayer. Let her see the truth. Let her see who really cared. Hours passed. The sun dipped low, and then around sunset, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Sarah stepped out slowly, her face pale, her eyes red. I stood by the door, waiting. "How did it go?" I asked softly. She hesitated, then broke down completely. "It was awful," she whispered through tears. "She said terrible things about you, Dad. She said you manipulated me, that you were just pretending to change. She even told me I was stupid for believing you. I felt a heavy ache in my chest, but I didn't interrupt. Sarah continued, trembling. I tried to defend you. I told her everything you said about forgiveness, about family. She just laughed. She said you'd always been a failure. Her voice cracked. But I didn't believe her. Not anymore. I walked closer and placed a hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing, Sarah. She nodded weakly. I realized something while she was talking. She never wanted peace, Dad. She wanted control. Even now, after all this time, I sighed. Some people build their happiness on other people's pain, until the day they find themselves standing in the ruins of their own making. Sarah looked up, wiping her tears. I told her I didn't want to live like that anymore, that I'm staying here with you. I smiled, though my eyes burned. You have no idea how much that means to me. That night, Sarah and I sat on the porch, drinking tea in silence. The wind was soft. The moon bright dot. She finally spoke again. Dad, I saw it in her eyes today. She wasn't angry because I chose you. She was angry because I stopped listening. I nodded slowly. That's the thing about control, Sarah. The moment you stop giving it to them, they call it betrayal. Sarah leaned back, sighing. I used to think revenge was about making someone suffer, but now I see it's about walking away stronger. Her words struck deep because that's exactly what it was. She didn't need to hurt her mother. She just needed to break free. The next morning, I woke up early. I found Sarah in the kitchen, humming softly while making breakfast, the same song her mother used to sing years ago, when things were still good. I watched her for a moment, realizing how much she'd changed. Once, she was angry, lost, confused. Now she was steady, calm, almost peaceful. Dad, she said suddenly, noticing me. Do you ever miss her? The question hung heavy in the air. I thought for a moment. I miss the person I thought she was, I said quietly, but not the person she became. Sarah nodded slowly, understanding. People change, I added. Sometimes for better. Sometimes for worse. But you can't spend your life chasing the version of them that no longer exists. She smiled sadly. I think I finally understand that now. Later that week, something unexpected happened. Her mother showed up, uninvited. I was in the garden when I saw her car pull up, that same sleek silver sedan she'd left in years ago. She stepped out, dressed perfectly as always, her expression unreadable. Sarah was standing by the door when she saw her. Mom. Her mother's tone was cold. I came to talk. Sarah hesitated. About what? About the house, her mother said sharply, and about your father's little stunt. I walked closer, calm but firm. It's not a stunt. It's closure. She turned to me, eyes full of contempt. You really think giving her this house makes you a hero? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Sarah stepped between us, her voice trembling but strong. Mom, stop. You don't get to come here and insult him. Not anymore. Mother froze. Excuse me? You heard me, Sarah said, her tone gaining strength. You told me he was selfish, lazy, useless, but he's the only one who ever stayed. You left when things got hard. He didn't. Her mother's face tightened. I did what I had to. No, Sarah said quietly. You did what was easy. Silence. For the first time, her mother had no words. I stood there, watching my daughter, no longer the confused, manipulated girl she once was, but a woman standing tall in her truth. That was the real victory. After a long pause, her mother turned without another word and walked back to her car. The door slammed. The engine started and she drove away, not once looking back. Sarah exhaled shakily, then turned to me. I guess that's it, she said softly. I smiled. That's closure. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Sarah and I sat outside once more. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You know, Dad, I used to think you took everything from me, but you actually gave me everything back, just in a way I didn't expect. I smiled, resting my hand over hers. Sometimes life teaches through pain, Sarah. But it's never to destroy us. It's to rebuild us stronger. She nodded quietly, her eyes glistening in the sunset. You were right. Family isn't about who's perfect. It's about who stays when everyone else leaves. And as the last light faded, I realized something: revenge doesn't always come in storms. Sometimes it comes in silence. When peace finally replaces the chaos. Narrator final reflection. When life tears people apart. It's easy to blame, harder to forgive. But sometimes, forgiveness is the sharpest form of revenge because it lets you walk away free. While they stay trapped in their own bitterness, Sarah found her freedom and I found mine in the end. I didn't lose a daughter, I got her back. It's strange how time changes everything. A few months ago, this house was filled with shouting, anger, and silence that hurt worse than any words. Now, there's laughter again. The sound of teacups clinking in the kitchen, the smell of breakfast, drifting through the air, and Sarah's voice humming a tune while she waters the plants. It almost feels like the house is breathing again. Sometimes I sit on the porch in the early mornings, watching the lights spill across the garden. And I think about everything that happened, every argument, every tear, every misunderstanding. And I realize something simple, yet profound. It had to happen, all of it. Because without the storm, we would never have rebuilt the bridge between us. Sarah's grown a lot since then. She got a promotion at work, started saving responsibly, and, for the first time, began making her own decisions without her mother's shadow looming over her. One day, while we were having breakfast, she said, "Dad, I think I'm finally happy." I smiled and said, "Happiness doesn't come from things, Sarah. It comes from peace, and you've earned yours." She laughed. "You sound like one of those motivational speakers on YouTube." I chuckled. Maybe I've just lived long enough to see that the hardest battles aren't fought outside, but inside us. A few weeks later, she showed me something that made me emotional. It was a framed photograph, the three of us, taken years ago when she was still a child. In the picture, we were smiling, arms around each other, unaware of what the future would bring. She placed it on the living room shelf and said quietly, "I don't want to erase the past anymore. I just want to understand it." That single line, "I just want to understand it," hit me harder than any apology. Because that's what healing truly is. Not pretending it never happened, but learning to live despite it. Sometimes her mother calls. Sarah answers politely. But with boundaries now, she listens, but doesn't get pulled in. One evening, through one of those calls, she told me, "Mom sounds lonely." I looked at her for a moment and said, "She probably is." But loneliness is the price we pay when pride matters more than people. Sarah nodded slowly. "Do you ever think she'll change?" I sighed. People only change when the pain of staying the same becomes too heavy to carry. Sarah stared at the floor for a moment, then said softly, "I hope she does." For her own sake, I smiled faintly. That's compassion, Sarah. You've grown into someone I'm proud of. Seasons passed. The leaves turned gold and fell. The air became crisp and gentle. Life felt simple again, and in that simplicity, I found peace. I started volunteering at a local shelter, helping people who'd lost their homes or families. And every time I listened to their stories of betrayal, loss, and heartbreak, I realized how universal pain truly is. But so is hope. One man told me, sometimes you lose everything, and that's when you realize what really matters. His words echoed my own journey, because losing my daughter, even for a while, taught me what love really means. It's not about control. It's not about being right. It's about showing up again and again, even when it hurts. One evening, as the sun was setting, Sarah and I were sitting outside, sipping tea. The sky was painted in gold and purple, and everything felt quiet, peaceful. "Dad," she said suddenly, "do you ever regret selling the house?" I looked at her with a smile. "Sarah, the house was never the point. It was just the stage where life taught us its lessons." She tilted her head. "And what lesson was that?" I thought for a moment. then said softly that love isn't ownership, it's presence. You can't buy loyalty, you can't force respect, and you can't demand trust. You earn it through patience, through pain, and through forgiveness. She smiled gently. You really have turned into a philosopher. I laughed. Maybe I just finally understand that peace is the real revenge. That night, after she went to bed, I walked through the quiet halls of the house. The same walls that once echoed with anger now felt warm again. Every corner carried a story of mistakes, of redemption, of forgiveness. I stopped in front of that old family photo. I smiled at my younger self. At the man who once thought revenge meant winning. He had no idea that the greatest victory would come through letting go. Narrator reflective tone. Life doesn't always give us the justice we imagine. Sometimes it gives us something better. Understanding revenge might bring satisfaction for a moment. But forgiveness brings peace that lasts a lifetime. When my daughter turned against me, I thought I'd lost everything, but what I really lost was my pride. And maybe that's what I needed to lose. Because in the end, I didn't take back the house. I took back her heart. And that's the kind of victory you don't measure in property or money, you measure it in peace. In love and in the quiet knowledge that you did what was right.